Today's episode is brought to you by 2AT Fitness and the Brew Bar.
Everything sequel contains explicit language. And why the fudge not, you melon farmer?
Hello and welcome to the Everything Sequel podcast. This is the Tremors edition. My name is Michael Shantz. I am from the How Dare You Awards. With me is my Dirt Dragon in Chief, Tom Stewart from Lonesome Whistle Productions. Hit me, Tom.
Shoots the nuts off a squirrel at 100 paces.
Yes. Let's see. Somewhere in my notes, I have that circled as your quote.
Yeah.
I got it right.
Well,
the other one,
the
other one I was really close on was "Rich people always fat."
But again, when it comes to the quotables, I think racism will always, I'll consider the racist one, but I'll probably eliminate it.
Right. Well, so this is where I'd like to just kind of divvy out enough rope to hang yourself with.
Yeah.
Because you said on a previous podcast that the one thing you want in a Western is violence and racism. So
yeah.
Did this movie have enough violence and racism for you? You monster.
It certainly, violence certainly. Race. I mean, I think there's just enough racism to justify this being a Western, but
there you go.
Not enough to make me hate it as a movie.
Right.
In fact, I think this is probably the most politically correct of all the Tremors movies.
I was just going to say, that's one of the things I really like about this movie is how race, not that it's not commented on, but it's not an issue for any of the characters.
Yeah.
Race or gender, does not matter to the characters in this movie, really.
When they do dig, I think they dig into some heavy racial and socioeconomic questions here, but they do it with a very light touch and in a way that is entirely progressive.
That's the thing.
This is a liberal take on a Western, but I mean, it's when you go with such a nostalgic format like the Western, you're kind of going to either go two ways. It's going to be like, our nostalgia is for a world where white people win all the time. Or our nostalgia is tempered by the fact we want to reintroduce minorities into American history.
Yeah.
And this one is definitely in that latter camp, I think.
Absolutely.
And, all the better and more impressive for it because, we know from other Tremors movies that you don't have to be politically right on for it to be good. So this really is going the extra mile.
Right. That's one of the things I love about this movie. And so if you haven't figured it out, ladies and gentlemen, we are of course talking about the 2004 film Tremors 4: The Legend Begins, directed by S.S. Wilson. That's one of the things about this fucking series is
he's you
have
the
directors who come and go and then come back.
Yeah, he's the certainly the best director that we've encountered who is also a ship.
Right. Yes.
But we speculated in a previous podcast that
I will get on board the S.S. Wilson based on the work in this movie.
That he may be schizophrenic. Is that? I mean, he may have another identity, which is the guy who basically directs all the other Tremors sequels. So, yeah. I mean, boy, did I go on a journey with this movie.
Me too. Now, was this your favorite movie
Yeah, absolutely, hands down.
in the series?
And that's the weirdest part of this. I went from screaming in protest at the television to this being hands down my favorite of the Tremors sequels, without a shadow of a
Yeah.
doubt.
It's so close for me. As you know, I went Bloodlines
Yeah.
#1, which is vastly different than your list, but that's really the only place we differ. Other than that, we're pretty close.
Yeah.
But that was a really hard decision for me, and obviously we'll get into that in the next podcast.
Mm-hmm.
But
I mean, I'm gonna lay my
love this
cards
movie.
on the table. I try to do, if I don't know the movie, if I have no previous experience with it, for the purposes of doing this podcast, I try and go in fresh and do as little research as possible ahead of viewing. So I was not aware that this was a prequel.
Okay.
I was not aware Michael Gross was going to be in it until the opening credits.
Mm-hmm.
I was convinced that the Western opening of this movie was just a teaser, and that once the opening titles were done, we would go into the present.
Flash forward.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
And, you know, my feeling that would happen was only encouraged by the montage of the titles. It's like a montage of photographs that I was convinced were going to eventually modernize and then turn into present day perfection. That did not happen.
No.
And at that point,
no.
I was angry and worried.
Right.
If I can just quote...
Well, unlike you, I was aware... Like I said, I was surprised to find when we started this series that I had not seen a single one of the sequels.
Yes.
I thought I must have seen them, but I was aware of the movies as they came along, up to especially this movie. Once we got to number 5, because it's so much later. I mean, it's like a decade later.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I was aware of this movie in existence, and I knew that it was a prequel, and I knew that it was a Western.
Mm-hmm. And I think...
So I did go in at least with that knowledge. But that to me was not a good thing.
No.
I was not expecting good things.
If I can quote
from this movie
directly from my notes, where does Michael Gross fit into all this? Please tell me he's not playing a historical version of his ancestor. And spoiler alert, everyone, that is exactly what he is. Hiram Gummer. It actually turns out to be the best possible choice they could have made, but
okay, that's my next question.
At the time,
I mean,
really
it works,
worried.
right? It's great.
It beyond works. I mean, it may not have done if Michael Gross didn't have this versatility. If we knew he didn't have,
if he wasn't as good an actor as he is.
Yeah, if we
right.
knew, you know, he's played these kinds of characters before. These kind of
officious,
you know, waspy kinds of affluent white people. I can't be any more specific than that. Capitalist fiend. So yeah, I mean, that's a big part of why it works. But you know, I mean, in the big scheme of Tremors, you know, as a series, this ability to have Bert without Bert is just a really strong choice.
Well, not just that. The reason I responded so favorably to this movie more than anything was his character arc.
Yeah.
It's the best in the series, I think.
Well, it does. I mean, I this is interesting. The things that bother me about this movie are nothing to do with this movie. It's all the things I hate about prequels, which you kind of can't avoid by doing a prequel. Right. That's my own. Those are my only beefs. And what impressed me so much about the Hiram Gummer character arc is it didn't get contaminated by those prequel problems as it so easily could. I mean, for sure,
For the audience, what are those?
Well,
What are those traps like?
Well, the three big ones for me. One is the kind of dramatic irony problem, right? You're basically you're constantly playing. What the characters know on screen, they know less than the audience do, because we know what's going to happen, and you're always playing off that dynamic. And I think that can become a problem because...
And it's hard to do well?
It's hard to do well, and it's not very interesting, dramatically.
Okay.
Second of all is, the problem...
It's not a good idea to, you're right in the sense of, it's not a great idea to have your audience know things that the character doesn't.
Yeah.
For an entire movie.
Exactly. It's not
sustainable. And that's the problem with prequels. Right.
Explaining things in continuity... So, given that this has happened, why don't people talk about
That's
it
number two.
later? That's the other one. And that really is a problem here. And then the third for me is just, stakes. The stakes are always lower because you know who's going to survive. You know who has to survive in order for the story to happen later. You might not know how it's going to turn out, but you know that certain people aren't going to die, certain things are going to happen. How do you raise the stakes when that's all predetermined? But actually, I mean, the Hiram Gummer arc is, we have a sense that something's going to happen in these movies that's going to make him obsessed with weaponry.
Right.
But they actually sort of...
They handle it so well, though. I mean,
so beautifully.
The last
in a way,
shot is just delightful.
I mean, it'll take a while for us to get there, but the final shot of this movie, is this kind of... is basically the birth of Burt Gummer in a single image.
Yes.
And for the movie to kind of offset that, you kind of need to have it in the scheme of doing a prequel. You kind of need to have this moment, but the way that this moment is, first of all, offset to the very last shot of the movie.
Yeah, right, exactly.
And doesn't interfere with what is actually, as I think you've alluded to, character growth. An origin story for Burt Gummer that is genuinely surprising and takes you in. This idea that he's not always been a hick is a totally new idea. But when you start to break it down, you realize, well, yeah, Hiram does have a lot of what Burt will eventually come to be, but in the ways you totally weren't expecting. But none of it feels inauthentic.
But on the opposite end of the spectrum.
Yeah, none of it feels like inauthentic or retconning, which is kind of incredible.
Yeah, I completely. That's one of the things that, there are all different kinds of things that you might respond to in a movie. You might respond to just the acting. You might respond to just the directing. You might respond to just the writing. But when all three are working, that's probably when a movie's going to be at its best. And this movie definitely has the writing.
Yes, it's a great script.
And I'll give it the acting as well. And I also, in regards to S.S. Wilson and the directing, or the film in general, this film does seem to suffer from, low-budget syndrome.
But
yeah, but in a way that works. They make it work for them just spectacularly.
I mean, the graboids are conspicuous by their absence for a large part of this movie. And once again, what seems like something that could harm the movie turns into absolutely the best choice they could make.
Right.
We don't see
that's how I felt too.
The graboids are only described verbally for the first third of this movie.
At least.
When we do see them, they're sparingly visualized and always puppets. I could not be happier.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, and you...
Which will
just
grain
from the
against
fact
what I
that
have
you-
to say about the next movie, but I digress.
Yeah.
We'll wait.
It's just, you know, the line that there's this attempt early on to re-inject the monsters with mystery because we've seen so much of them in the past two movies.
Right.
We've and now we're going back to trying to turn them into kind of movie monsters that are a little more obscure, and you know that their danger and threat comes from the unknown about them.
Yes.
And a prequel is actually a really good framework in which to do that in, because nobody knows
sure.
about anything. You know, there's no foreknowledge of them here.
And they even cover at the end why their ancestors wouldn't know about it.
Well, yeah, I mean that is the problematic scene in every prequel is how do
It's the only thing that kind of screams of that's a little weak. I get not, telling the world, but you think it might be passed down to family members.
It's very contrived, and you know, I think that is where the problem of a prequel harms the movie.
Sits. Right.
However, I've seen this technique passed off in movies and TV shows that are much better regarded than this, and no one seems to have a problem with it. So more power to them. You know, they did this in Star Trek Discovery.
Oh, okay.
Exactly the same scene where everyone agrees not to mention something because there's no way you wouldn't mention it in like Star Trek the original series, and Star Trek Discovery is like 5 years before
that, right.
So it's exactly the same technique, and I think it's an accepted convention. I don't think it works, and I don't think it works in this movie, but you know,
maybe that's it though. Maybe it's just the accepted convention.
Yeah.
So that we can get on with our lives.
And you know, it's important to keep everything, you know, in perspective. If prequel based media is still pulling that kind of shit now, the fact that Tremors did it how long ago? What are we talking?
This is 2000. Oh, you mean the original?
Yeah, no, this one 15 years ago.
Yeah, this is 2004. So
it's obviously
more than 15.
That's not a big deal. It's like the discussion we had about Phantom Menace. You know, the digital effects in Tremors Aftershocks are bad. No better or worse than the Phantom Menace, which is supposed to be the best example of digital imagery at the time. So, it's not enough for me to dislike any aspect of this movie.
No, yeah. So, all right. Well, let's get into, you know, just for a frame of reference for the audience. As we said, the title of this movie is Tremors 4: The Legend Begins. So we are in the year 1889. Mm-hmm. We are not in perfection. Well, we are, but it is called rejection. I don't know who would name a town Rejection, but they did.
One of my angry, worried notes was, sarcastically, I assume we're going to find out how it became perfection at some point.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Me too.
But again, I think the key to this movie is how low-key and underplayed everything in it is.
Yeah.
So we know that's going to happen, but it just sort of happens.
And this movie takes its time. This movie lets characters develop.
Yeah.
This movie, it does a lot right.
It just sort of happens. Like I was sort of like awaiting this moment, and it's so understated when it does happen. I'm like, wow.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, it's like, I'm trying to think of these.
You get like little surprises, and then you start getting marvels, and then you get to a point where you're like, this movie's fucking great.
I mean, I'm conscious of that. This is a video sequel, and we've talked about how they're generally less well regarded as movies than theatrically released cinema. But I can't imagine a situation in, you know, J.J. Abrams' Star Wars or Star Trek where he would just, like, gently sort of let a piece of mythology like this just drift into view and then drift out again.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
for anyone who's seen The Rise of Skywalker, that is 2 hours of someone punching you in the face with mythology. This is like,
Save it, Tom.
I know. But here it's just like yes, we all know these things are going to happen because it's a prequel and we have to catch up with where Tremors is, where the first Tremors starts.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think what we're not expecting is for it to be dealt with so deftly every single time.
Right.
And that goes for something, a point of comparison with the previous two films is how important romance is to these movies. And here we have a romance, but it's a really subtle, it's so subtle and so
subtle
nuanced.
And sweet and
yeah. And
yeah.
you know, looking back at other films we've done, maybe this is what I kind of wanted Back to the Future Part 3 to be.
How dare you disparage that love?
You know, I mean, at the beginning I was like, I wonder if we should use the phrase going Western as a synonym for when sequels run out of ideas and you have to bring cowboys in to help out. You literally have to bring
that's the thing, is that's why I thought this movie would suck.
Yeah.
Which is strange because I really like Back to the Future 3, but all right, listen, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to dive deep into Tremors 4. Stay tuned, everybody. Does the coronavirus have you feeling oogie? Have you been sitting on your couch for weeks? Nay, have you been sitting on there for months? Well, it's time for you to get back in shape. Check out 2AT Fitness. You can find them on Instagram. You can find them on Facebook. 2AT Fitness was started by Tina Bernard. She is ready and raring to go to help you get back into the shape you want to get into. They've got all kinds of classes. They've got outdoor in-person classes. They've got online classes if that's what you prefer. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time to get back in shape. You're going to find a variety of exercises. You're going to have strength training, cardio, weightlifting, even fun 5-minute burnouts that will push you to your limits. So get off the couch, get into shape. Go ahead and check out 2AT Fitness. Tina Bernard has got you for all your needs. I know her personally. She's fantastic. You're not going to meet a better person to help you become the new you. Check it out. And we are back. Tom and I are here discussing the 2004 Tremors 4: The Legend Begins. So, all right. We were kind of talking about the basic setup for this plot. We were getting into the idea that we are in rejection. We are at the bottom dollar mine.
That's right.
And there are some deaths. And Hiram Gummer, who owns the mine, has to come and kind of find out what the deal is in his attempts, because he's on his last few dimes.
Yeah.
And he's got to get this mine restarted, but he can't do it, of course, until he gets rid of all the graboids. Although they're not really, there are graboids, but we also, the mythology of the creatures themselves, we discussed in the first few podcasts, this idea that they were ever evolving.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like they tried that here, but I mean, it's still so basically it's like we have the dirt dragons, which are hatched out of the eggs.
Yeah.
And they're like the graboids in miniature form before they start getting bigger, before they shed their shells and get big.
Right. That's as good a description as you're going to get. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, and it's they make a big deal of the eggs hatching. And I think it's again, the doing a prequel unburdens them from having to create a new monster.
Right.
This is more like, acceptably, because they're doing a prequel, they can sort of go over old ground a little more, and this is the kind of pre-stage graboid, where I'm sure was a big factor. And also,
Well,
you
I imagine it had to do with the budget too, because I just had this real sense of, hey, let's build small shit because it'll cost less.
yeah, but also, you get a chance to rename the monster.
Yes,
which is always
right.
a big deal for these movies.
Always huge in this universe is naming the creatures.
They're dirt dragons, which is, well, I mean, I like it more than ass blasters, but it feels it feels like an authentically in period name for the graboid.
Mm-hmm.
So I like everything about that. And one of the things that kind of impresses me overall about this movie, it wants to be in being a prequel and then not being Burt Gummer in it. They want this to be something of an outlier in the series. But they still deliver on the Tremors formula. I mean, we're still using in-period technology to defeat the Tremors. Because it's 1889, that's a telegraph and a steam engine.
Yeah. And a punt gun.
And
which, by the way, one of my notes is apparently that's a real thing.
Yeah. Well, I know a little about this period in history, and I was continually impressed about how much history they get right.
Me too. Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
I mean, there's jokes that only work if you know your history, like the one about Doc Holliday.
Right.
And again, it's sort of like above and beyond, really.
And there's the one about the Alamo.
The joking about the Alamo, yeah, exactly. So I think this is kind of remarkable. I also really enjoyed. I mean, this is it's often when people make westerns nowadays, it's difficult to justify why you'd be doing a western. What's a modern day audience going to get out of this? And they do not have this problem, I don't think, at all. It's continually justified that why we're going into the past. But also, they're able to do modern-day movie versions of things in a Western. Like the countrified Eye of the Tiger montage sequence.
Right, yeah.
And that's the perfect collision of, this kind of contemporary action movie and an old-fashioned Western. And whichever way you kind of come at this movie, it holds together.
And that's the thing. Like, I was so prepared to try to poke as many holes as I possibly could in this movie. When I knew that it was, coming in, understanding it was a prequel and a Western, I was like ready to tear this movie to ribbons.
Absolutely.
For the piece of shit I assumed it was. And I kept going, oh, I like that. Oh. Yeah, that's good.
I mean,
And all of a sudden, at a certain point, maybe especially once Billy Drago shows up, I'm like, this movie's fucking great.
I mean, that for a video sequel, that's like having Brad Pitt in your movie.
Right.
He is
fresh the Brad Pitt of direct-to-video.
Yeah, and again, I think when he turns up, it really enhances the credibility of this movie as a Western. It just kind of clicks into place, like I'm now watching this as a Western, and it works as that. Like, that's the point in the movie where I sort of...
Well, and that's the other thing. So I was speaking earlier to what we respond to in movies, and there's stuff at the beginning of this movie where I had conscious thoughts of, maybe that was the first day of filming. Because I was seeing acting that felt a little stilted and not, I just... From secondary characters mostly.
Yeah.
The band of goofs that go up to the mine with them.
Mm-hmm.
You're probably not seeing a lot of those actors still working, I imagine. But, Um,
No. I mean, I think there are. I think there are definitely. It's always a difficult game with like a progressive western. You want the ethnic characters to be real, but you're also dealing with a formula and genre where they're treated stereotypically. And we get
Right.
flavors of both. There's cartoonish Mexicans, which is a staple of the Western.
Sure.
You've got but for the most part, I think when
Well, one of my notes too, though, was I said, the Chinese family. I think we talked about this maybe separately at some point. I said, this Chinese family, they speak better English than I do.
yeah, and
You know?
there's just one or two missteps here and there. And I think the line "I make big firecracker, I show you how." Should have been cut from the movie. But again, it's like just tiny little missteps in either direction. But the overall feeling of this is a movie that's pro-immigrant,
Yes,
pro
absolutely.
melting pot America.
Melting pot.
Um,
And not just that, but, the arc of Hiram Gummer, like, yeah, he's kind, he is officious. He's a rich, he's pompous. He's a bit of an asshole. But you see something within him even at the beginning. I also love, by the way, that his stagecoach comes. They take off his luggage. They are like, he didn't get off. And the coach goes away. And you just have that silhouette of Michael Gross standing, he really looks like the Son of Man painting. You think he's going to turn around and have an apple in front of his fucking face.
Yeah.
But you can see goodness within that character, even within his buffoonery and his assholery.
Yeah.
And
which is the Burt Gummer magic. It's just a different
exactly.
It's just a different iteration of that character magic, which is why this works.
But yeah, and the thing that I started marveling at was you have a Mexican or Mexican American character, you have Chinese characters, you have
Native American.
a Native American,
mm-hmm.
a white woman, and a white man. And they don't have issues with each other.
No.
That are based on race or gender or class. And I found that really refreshing, and it kind of warmed my heart. Maybe that's because of where we are in America right now, but
it certainly is.
I loved seeing that.
And it's pie-eyed, but what makes it kind of less utopian and actually more of a political statement is that rejection is a model of America, and there's all these possibilities for a kind of democratic coalition of different ethnicities to work, different classes, demographic groups. But the big problem that's getting in the way is economy, economic disparity, which they address through Hiram's relationship to the young boy in the Chinese family. Again and again, they refer to this, these life lessons that he's trying to teach him about basically, taking the other guy for all he's worth.
Right.
So the fact that,
but he's the one that learns a lesson in the end.
Yeah. I think that's what's great about this. It's not, and with the Native American character, he's constantly. Basically, he has to go and see this cigar store Indian every day. Mm-hmm. And it wears him down to the point where he has no self-worth. I mean, I'd have to do a survey, but I don't think that there are that many movies at this time that are asking those questions and having those kinds of representations in the normal scheme of things. And when they do, it's a bit anachronistic, but an Unforgiven or Open Range or something, everyone's lauding them to pieces and just going, oh my god, it's so good, it's a Western, but it's liberal and it's progressive. But this is doing it all under the radar.
Yeah, totally.
Because it's just good character writing.
That's the other thing, yeah.
So I'm so impressed.
Really impressed with with the writing. That's what I love most about this movie.
It's really nicely done, and this whole kind of stripping away of Hiram Gummer, and again, the movie does this in really subtle, really subtle suggestions that he doesn't have as much money as he's claiming he has. It's actually done in quite a nuanced way. But very early on, he talks about having an aperitif after dinner, and at that point, I'm like, this guy isn't as cultured as he says he is. And they leave these little these breadcrumb trails for you to go, okay, this guy is he's not quite a con man, but he's definitely trying to convince...
But he's a little full of shit.
Yeah, he's full of shit for sure about his wealth and means. And I just love that, because that's more interesting, and you have an actor like Michael Gross who can play all sides of that.
Yeah, he's
that
fantastic.
Dynamic.
And like you said before, when Billy Drago shows up, I mean, he is reveling in this role. Like he's loving every bit of it. I came up with a band name based on one thing he does in this movie called the Black Hand Salami Shooters.
And again, you're taking a scene that is in virtually every Western, where with this kind of this William Tell apple on the head moment with a gun, but you're replacing it with salami, and you have this substitution that turns it into something unique and original and kind of weird and wonderful
and fun. Yeah, exactly.
And they do that throughout this movie. I think it's remarkable, and that relationship of, and again, it's like you use Black Hand Kelly or Billy Drago wearing a cowboy outfit, which is what we're talking about here.
Yeah, for those that don't know, the citizens of Rejection decide that what they need is a real gunslinger, so they send out not really an SOS, but a message via the cable, and of course, on a dark, stormy night, who shows up? Billy Drago.
Yeah, I think
Black Hand Kelly.
In the same way that the podcast Star Wars Minute refers to Space Jimmy Smits instead of the actual name of the character, which I can't even recall. We're talking about Western Billy Drago here.
Yeah, exactly.
Not Untouchables Billy Drago.
Not Untouchables Billy Drago. Just
well, he's kind of becomes a sort of a mentor figure. He's part of Hiram's transformation into a gunslinger, which will then lead to his transformation into the gun-toting nut that we see in the late, or that his descendants will become. So again, that's
correct.
That's using the conventions of the genre, this kind of trope, the man who shot Liberty Valance, John Wayne teaching James Stewart how to shoot, using it towards this this kind of developmental stage in the ancestry of Burt Gummer. So basically, I mean, what I feel about this movie is everything is going in the right direction. Everything that they put in the movie helps.
Yeah,
nothing,
that's what it is. You're right.
Nothing detracts from it, except, my theory about prequels is that we're getting less and less of them, at least in movies, because reboots are just have fewer story problems.
Right.
And this is a good case study of that. None of it, because it's because the quality is so good, it doesn't really bother me. But when you see certain scenes, you think, oh my God, this is, the prequel framework is clunky as shit.
Fraught with peril.
It really is.
Fraught with peril.
And so I'm not surprised that reboot kind of took that mantle, because you get everything you want in a sequel, but you get other problems, but far fewer.
Mm-hmm.
But that's why this movie is so good, is that you even though you're aware that it's the peril, the perils of prequels are at play, none of it detracts from your enjoyment, or even just, not just enjoyment. It's not just about it being entertaining. It's like, this is good.
Yeah.
This is good
exactly.
stuff. And you know, you've alluded to the kind of.
I mean, the SOS attack.
I mean,
In the cabin.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Another shot I absolutely adore in this movie is when we get a kind of split overground underground shot of a graboid chasing a wagon.
Yes.
And he appears briefly. It's almost like
under the bridge.
It's like the most perfect moment in a cartoon. You know, like a Bugs Bunny or a Wile E. Coyote,
Yeah.
but in live action, brought to life. And it's
great.
it's to me, that's as soon as I think of Tremors as a series. I mean, admittedly, I haven't seen the original in quite a while. That's one of the most.
It did become a series too, though.
Yeah. That's one of the most iconic shots in the whole pantheon. For me.
You think so? Yeah.
The graboid, it appears briefly under a bridge while it's chasing a wagon.
Yeah.
And for a second, you see the wagon and the graboid going.
Well, it's also one of the few animated shots, though.
Yeah, I mean, 2004, they should be getting a little better, and I think probably having digital in such a limited capacity, and
Well, that's what I liked about this movie is, I love that shot under the bridge.
Yeah.
It's pretty delightful. But I love all the puppetry stuff.
Oh, completely. And just, this idea of moving them underground and have, that it works economically because sometimes you can just have floorboards coming up and you have the same effect. You don't actually need to show them if they're always underground and coming at you.
Well, yeah, you have the Jaws sense.
Yeah. You can sort of do it that way, but for the suspense of the movie, it increases that. And they go to town on the body horror in this one. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of decapitations in this movie compared to the other movies, and I mean I like that a lot.
It's like First Shot.
I don't know why. I don't know why suddenly this movie has a fetish about decapitations compared to the other movies, but I'm not complaining.
Not to mention Billy Drago just being swallowed whole. Love that scene.
Yeah.
All right, let's take another break, and when we come back, we will finish up this delightful fucking movie. I love Tremors 4. All right, everyone, we'll be right back.
If you're anything like me, you spend the majority of the day wondering whether you want coffee, beer, or wine. Whichever way you fall, Brew Bar has you covered. Located in the heart of 3rd Avenue Village in glorious downtown Chula Vista, California, which is also my neck of the woods, Brew Bar is a coffee shop, bar, and eatery rolled into one delightful package. Tim and Alex run the place, and let me tell you, listeners, these guys know their coffee. And after you've been in their company, so will you. They turned me on to pour over, and it's literally all I drink now. If for some crazy reason you don't want to try the best coffee in the world, they've got espresso drinks, all kinds of teas, and even coffee cocktails. You heard me? Coffee tails. And we're just getting started. Bottle service on craft beer and wine, alcoholic and caffeinated potions, an all-day food menu with plenty of vegan options. All served up in an atmosphere hip enough to know you're getting the best quality, but not too hip that you feel the need to drive to 7-Eleven and get a bucket of brown swill. Brew Bar. It's the best place to be for beer, wine, coffee, and tea. And if you go, you might even see me.
And we're back. Tom and I are here discussing a movie that I think certainly pleases our spirit beasts. Tremors 4, The Legend Begins.
Yeah.
The 2004 S.S. Wilson movie. What, essentially, not that we've been kind of going plot by plot point, but if we're talking about the end of the movie, this final stand, I think it's pure magic.
Yeah.
I love everything about it.
Yeah, I like, I was particularly impressed by the way they were able to use the kind of beats of a Western, like the kind of spaghetti Western showdown.
Yeah, right.
But use that as a fake out to Tremors-like action chicanery.
Mm-hmm.
It's. I mean, I don't know if it's just. I mean, certainly that generation of filmmakers, they grew up with westerns. The conventions would be second nature to them. So maybe they definitely feel that kind of mindset. But I'm just so impressed with that interplay of here's the formula of a Tremors sequel. Here's the western. Let's put
And
one
we'll
on
meld
top of the
them.
other.
Yeah.
And it never feels like anything is bursting at the seams at any point.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
They're simpatico.
Well, and speaking to what we spoke to earlier, it seemed clear that they might not have had as much money, but they use everything to their advantage. I love the saw killing, which is essentially is like a Jaws 2 murder of a graboid, putting the saw in the ground and then banging it like a drum.
Ugh, yeah.
Until the graboid just splits itself in half, and you see the orange goop kind of come up through the sand. It's fucking great.
Here's a potential fly in the ointment.
Uh-oh.
Where do you stand on slow motion? Because there's a lot of it in this movie.
That's true.
I don't know your feelings about slow motion.
Here's where I officially stand on slow motion.
Everybody set the recorder.
If you use it, it had better work.
That's really good. Yeah, that's a really nice way of putting it. I don't know. I mean,
because there's all kinds of ways. You know, you have.
I might be a slow motion racist.
Oh well, that wouldn't surprise me.
No, let me qualify that. Not a racist who moves slowly. I think I'm someone who sort of sees slow motion, and I just think, the only good slow motion is not slow motion. Like I think
you're
I'm
prejudiced against it.
I think I'm generally prejudiced against it, and maybe I was looking for things to kind of qualify my love of this movie, but I did sort of say that maybe slowing down the film is not one of this movie's best moves. But then again, that is a Western convention.
Yeah.
Sergio Leone uses it.
Sure.
Very common to kind of slow down the action movies use it.
Oh yeah. But it's like, speaking to when it works, not a sequel, but there's a moment in Point Break in that last bank robbery scene where the slow motion kicks up.
Yeah.
But to me, the only thing it reveals is, in the moment, you're going to think Patrick Swayze is the best actor on the fucking planet because he sees that a cop has got a gun. You see his realization wash over his face that he is going to have to kill that man if he wants to live.
Yeah.
And points. I mean, it's amazing. It's fucking amazing. So when it's good, it's really good. But you have all different kinds of slow motion. You have the hero walk. You have the hero walk with something blowing up behind them.
Another way of looking at it is maybe if you do it more than once a movie, you've got to have a very good reason
for it. Yeah, that's fair.
And I don't think this movie should have as much slow motion in it. But again,
I would tend to lean
for
towards
that either.
I would tend to agree with you on that. But at the same time, it was not consciously in my thoughts that I wrote it down as a note.
Okay.
So, must not have bothered me too much.
Got it. Now, this movie ends on a freeze frame.
Yes.
Again, quite a Western thing. Butch and Sundance.
Sure.
I think that's playing in here a little bit. Now this is the most demented shot in any Tremors sequel.
Yes, yeah.
Like, do you want to describe it to people?
All right, first let me just say...
You watched it again last night, so you probably have a more vivid sense of, the madness of this shot than I do.
Well, and let me just say, first of all, don't get me wrong, I was fully on board Tremors 4 long before this scene takes place.
Yeah.
But when this happened and that freeze frame came up, I mean, I think I fell off the couch laughing. I was so delighted.
It's like...
I fucking loved it.
It's as if... It's like the ending, if you can imagine... I'm going to try and describe it tonally before Mike
Well, hang on. Like,
describes it.
let's
Okay.
also put into perspective the character of Hiram Gummer.
Mm-hmm.
When you first meet him, he goes into the hotel and somebody mentions something about weapons,
Mm-hmm.
and not his first lines, but his line at that moment is, "I don't own a firearm."
Yeah. And that's your dramatic irony moment of...
Right. And
Well,
then you
you
have this
fucking
moment
will.
where all the other characters are telling him it's the wild, wild west. Even the kid pulls out his slingshot, like, what's the matter with you? Later in the movie, with Blackhand Kelly, Billy Drago, he tells him to grab a gun, something you're comfortable with, and they are shooting off these cannons, rifles, 6-shooters, and then you hear this really dainty pop. And he and what's the character's name? Juan Padilla look over at him like, what the fuck? And he goes, what you said, pick something I'm comfortable with.
Mm-hmm.
And Blackhand Kelly goes, you're right, I did say that. So putting it in the background that this character is a far cry from the Burt Gummer we know from the rest of the series.
He missed with a cannon.
Yeah, right. He missed one
line.
shot with the punt gun that drew the derision from other characters, saying you missed with a cannon. So he is not efficient. And in this scene, it starts with him practicing with a pistol, shooting at bottles.
Mm-hmm.
The child is hitting with bottles. What we'll say is clearly going to be his new lady lover.
Yeah.
She is firing just perfectly fine into the bottles, and he keeps missing, and she delivers him a present.
Yeah. A machine gun.
Yeah.
And I don't know how to describe it. He goes apeshit on this machine gun.
Well, what I love the most, too, is he doesn't really go apeshit until he starts hitting things that he was aiming for, He actually starts hitting bottles. It's easier for him to hit what he's trying to hit. And the victory of that is what makes him go, ah!
Yeah.
And he's going nuts as he's cranking, the bullets through the chamber. It's just delightful.
And his love interest looks appropriately worried.
Yeah. Right.
Which is another nice touch. And what I like about this is it obviously...
I mean, they go far in this movie because she's like a sandy or, a strawberry blonde.
Yeah.
And, of course, Burt Gummer is married to Reba McEntire.
Yeah.
So they're even trying to draw that comparison,
Certainly.
of the kind of woman that the Gummers are attracted to.
Yeah, and, it's obviously, it's origin story, it's origin story forward. But, this movie's been about... It's been a great opportunity to sort of to put Burt Gummer's politics in a more negative light by recasting him as a different character.
Mm-hmm.
So you're able to put out a political critique of Burt Gummer without just spending the movie dumping on Burt Gummer.
Right.
And there's, I mean, it's like all the tensions we've been talking about with Burt Gummer are in this one shot.
Right.
You know, it's like we get this vicarious thrill of seeing a movie through his crazy eyes, but at the same time, everyone in the audience and everyone on screen also needs to be worried about how sinister this guy is, and that's all there,
down deep.
And the movie doesn't pull. You know, that's what's great. The movie doesn't kind of pull away from that. That idea that we've talked about before. You know, Burt Gummer is definitely the guy you want to watch carrying a Tremors movie. He's the last person you would want to interact with in real life.
Right.
And this is, you know, this is this kind of like...
You wouldn't want to put Burt Gummer into Sleepless in Seattle.
No, Michael, I would. With that machine gun aimed at Rosie O'Donnell. And I just think, you know, this is just like a cathartic moment in the franchise of, you know, we're at this precipice where I don't think at this point we foresee any more Tremors sequels.
Well, that's the other thing is that, and this is, we're going to talk about this in the next episode, but I think that's why I responded so positively to Bloodlines too, was because to me, they made this movie thinking this is it.
Well, where else can you go? When you've gone to the past. That's
right,
it.
Exactly.
You're done.
You've gone to the past. They don't make another movie for a decade.
Right.
So it feels like this was intended to be the end.
Yeah, well, it's kind of, it's bringing it full circle enough that you could end it here if you want to. But
yes.
I don't know. I think probably just the performance of Michael Gross in that scene. You know, if you were a producer, you would look at it and think, Burt Gummer's still got room to grow.
Mm-hmm. But this is one of the things I love about the series is that essentially in almost every movie, there's somewhere for the character to go.
Definitely.
And I really respect that about the series. I love that about this series.
And, you know, not to, I doubt anyone is thinking in these terms, but certainly when we're watching these movies, we're thinking in these terms. The Burt Gummer of Bloodlines comes preloaded with Hiram. And that totally changes things for me. I mean, they do other backstory things in Bloodlines which are really interesting. Less successfully than this movie, but interesting. At least my opinion. But but I just think it's it does that thing that prequels very rarely do. They offer a new perspective on old material.
Right.
And nowhere is that clear, you know, that Burt Gummer's ancestry genuinely does explain a lot about the tensions within his character. Whether it's
in the future, right.
Socially, emotionally, politically, whatever. Like, it's all bound up in there, and you can't see him pre-Legend Begins.
You know what it is?
Afterwards.
You know what it is?
I don't think any...
You know those...
Yeah.
You know those, you know, when you were a kid and you saw the evolution pictures and you saw, like, kind of man-ape and walking along till they become human?
I thought you were talking about the movie Evolution, and I was like, don't tell me they did more than one of that movie.
No, I know. We're safe, Tom. We're safe.
I'm sure S.S. Wilson.
But my point was like, you can imagine it. So what you have is Hiram Gummer being one of those pictures on that timeline, and Burt Gummer, say from Bloodlines. But you can imagine sort of the evolution in between them.
Definitely. Definitely.
between the two movies, almost based solely on how good an actor he is.
But also think about the alternative way they could have done this prequel. Basically, Burt Gummer is Hiram Gummer would be Black Hand Kelly.
Yeah, right.
You could do. I mean, that would be the more obvious route to go.
Sure.
That he was a gunslinger in the Old West. I mean, again, it's like we're Back to the Future 3. I mean, obviously, it's a running gag that everyone's ancestor or descendant is exactly the same as they are.
Yeah, right.
And you can't get out of this history. You can't dodge genetics. But this movie is actually doing something more interesting than that, and sort of saying that yes, all of this adds up to Burt Gummer, but Burt Gummer wasn't.
But it's Hiram Gummer's life experience that leads to it.
Right, but but in order to get there, he has to be an entirely different character. Just happens to be a character that Michael Gross can play remarkably well and effortlessly.
Yeah, completely. Well, all right. There you have it, I think.
Yeah, no, I got nothing else to say.
I don't really have any other notes other than I loved the pink lining of Black Hand Kelly's black overcoat. And, just in ending this, I will go make a piece of molasses gingerbread cake.
Yeah. No, it's wonderful. I mean, the final note I want to end on is that is about outliers in a sequel franchise.
Yeah.
There's a kind of idea that they're necessarily a bad thing. And I don't think that's true. I think you can score with a movie that is unlike all the other sequels in your series.
Of course.
If you do it right. Well, I don't know. I mean, I want to drag everything back to the Bond movies, but I'm gonna.
But of course you do, and you will.
But, the things that people say about On Her Majesty's Secret Service and License to Kill, there's this sort of assumption that, it's not giving us what we want from a Bond film, therefore it is wrong. But if you actually watch these movies, it's like, you're getting everything you want from a Bond movie.
Mm-hmm.
Really, really are. You just have to, you just have to unfocus your eyes. Sometimes literally. And I feel like this is the same thing where it's like this is the Tremors movie that doesn't have Burt Gummer in it. You can watch it with that perspective, and you may be disappointed. But if you watch it, you watch it thinking this is going to deliver on everything you want from a Tremors movie, but you're going to get an interesting movie on top of that.
Yeah. We are of like minds. Tremors 4, The Legend Begins. Ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't seen it, go fucking watch it.
Yeah.
Then contact us. Find us on Facebook, find us on Instagram or Twitter, and let us know what you think of Tremors 4, The Legend Begins. Does it go to the top or the bottom of your list? It should be the top or near the top.
I like how you kept that open. And then you basically implied that anyone who didn't have this at the top of the list
they're wrong.
is a moron.
I'm a dick.
That says it all about this podcast, I think.
Dick is my default position.
Freedom of speech, but that's also the freedom of speech is the freedom to be a moron.
Yeah, exactly.
And don't we know that living in today's America?
Make your point known. No, you might be reprimanded. Likewise, you can send us an email to everythingsequel@gmail.com. Please rate and review us. It really does help. We're trying to fix the algorithms.
We're on YouTube as well.
Yes.
We're on YouTube.
We are on YouTube officially.
Watch us on YouTube. Leave a comment. Subscribe.
Sort of. Watch us, sort of.
Yeah. Well, there's a big dose of visual content to go with the audio content on YouTube.
There you go. All right, for Tom Stewart from Lonesome Whistle Productions, I am Michael Shantz from the How Dare You Awards. We'll see you next time for Tremors Bloodlines. Tremors 5 Bloodlines. Say bye, Tom. I'm nothing if not professional.
The legend continues.
Yeah. We'll see you next time.